I think that the two are really one and the same. There's been an intentional effort to separate medical from recreational, but in the reality, a lot of people use cannabis for self-medication purposes. What it does is it really accelerates the debate in the United States. Obviously, if Canada is making a decision, it has to have an impact on what the U.S. federal government does.
And in terms of what Colombia does, you are focused specifically on medical marijuana, correct?
We have a portfolio of pharmaceutical quality medical products, but we have a number of products that are also medical oriented that can be used in a variety of settings.
What do you think of the regulation so far in Canada? How do you expect this to play out?
Well, look, I think it's going to be good for Canada, but I think what the United States has the ability to do is to leverage off of the state level programs to really use data to drive policy decisions. And ultimately, we have more of a fully integrated model in the United States. So our company actually touches the patients. We're not just a wholesaler and a manufacturer. And because of that, we can create products based on the needs of patients and really inform the political debate at the local, municipal, and state level.
Why do you believe what Canada does will have an impact on what the U.S. may do?
Well, whether we like it or not, the U.S. and Canadian markets are very porous. There's an enormous synergy between our cultures, between our countries, between our economies. And, you know, I think that the quote that we saw earlier from the earlier segment says it all. You know, if we're trying to make America great again, we really have to have policies that foster the growth of an industry. And this is an enormous industry. It's the largest cash crop on the planet. U.S. has some of the best and most sophisticated operators in the space, even though we have this federal prohibition. So there's no reason why we shouldn't have the leadership position.
And have you heard anything out of the administration, really, that leads you to think that will actually happen?
It may. It may. I think the Congress is taking a lot of steps. So, for example, the States Act doesn't really require a Herculean change to federal policy. It just reaffirms the legitimacy of state law. And I think that's really the direction we need to go. There's no reason to go through this enormous change when we have the ability to take sort of steps and be very methodical about it.
So you think the prohibition analog makes sense?
Yes.
When people compare it to how that happened in this country?
To a certain extent, yes.
What's the biggest risk? I mean, so many things seem to be moving in the direction of broader acceptance of marijuana. But during periods like this, there can be backlash. There can be just a couple of headlines that can get people thinking in another direction. What keeps you up at night?
So I think that the risk is we move too quickly and we disintermediate the criticisms or concerns from the debate. I think it's very important to have a very balanced approach. You need to have enforcement. You need to have the people who have expressed concerns about the rollout of a controlled substance. And there's nothing wrong with that. Ultimately, what we want is a very healthy industry. We want an industry that grows. You see the valuations that the market is attributing to these companies. Organically, these businesses should be doubling in size year after year, let alone M&A activity.
What do you think of the valuations right now, especially when you look at the publicly traded cannabis stocks? I mean, they've been incredibly volatile, but in general, it seems like there's very lofty expectations out there in the market. Does it make sense to you? There
are lofty expectations, but as I said, the growth rates are staggering. Every time a new state opens up a new market, you're opening up an entire new population that can be served by these programs. You know, self-serving, I think that the valuations are actually inexpensive. But the fact is, there's an enormous amount of top-line growth and margin improvement that can happen over time.